it's Melissa from Simply Yarn, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to make this washcloth. It can be a dishcloth, a hand towel, obviously depending on the size it might work better for one purpose or another. Now this one that I made, I actually used this peaches and cream stripy yarn, and so it already was multicolored, and to be honest I don't know how I did it where I actually made the blocks of color turn out this way instead of them like changing in the middle of the cloth, the dishcloth. So that was pretty amazing of how this turned out. But if you use an already multicolored stripy type yarn, it might not necessarily look like this where the color blocks change perfectly. So what I'm going to do today is we're still going to do different colors, but I'm going to show you how to change colors along the way. So if you have a solid color yarn, and you'd like to learn how to change colors along the way, we'll do that. But even if you want to just use a solid color, that works too. Now, I just want to show you some of the detail in advance so that you can notice in advance what we're going to be doing. So along the top, I did a few rows of just the regular knit stitch. And you can see that I carried that border along the edges and then at the bottom as well. So it just kind of gives a subtle border to the project. And so we're going to start with the knit stitch along the top. And then in the middle though, in the center here, you can see I did the seed stitch. So a knit stitch border, seed stitch in the center, and then a knit stitch border on the other side. So that's what we will be doing today, and I'm going to be using these colors. So let's go ahead and get started. What you'll need today is, of course, yarn. You don't need to do multicolored if you don't want, but if you are, get that ready. Needles. Now I'm going to be using my circular needles mainly because I only have this size in circular needles. So I'm going to be using the size 7, which is also, let's see, I think it's the 4.5 millimeter. Yeah, so these are 4.5 millimeter or US 7, or, these are an 8, which are 5 millimeter. And so use what you have. If you have straight needles, great. If you have circular needles, great. Do you. But I do find that, especially with the washcloths, if you don't want there to be like big gaps in them, the smaller needles work better. If you want it to have more like holes in it, or and you want that to kind of be part of the design, a larger needle can help you do that. But if you want it a little tighter like this, then the smaller needles work better. The other thing you're going to need is make sure that your yarn is 100% cotton for a dishcloth, because these wash well, they hold their shape, they dry quickly. So definitely use cotton. I would not use wool or even acrylic. I would prefer using just cotton. Of course, you'll also need scissors and a yarn needle later on. And if you are reaching for a specific size, I would also have a ruler. This one is approximately almost like 9 inches by 8. I guess maybe I was trying to shoot for 8 by 8, but either way, it's about 9. I'll probably go for a 9 by 9, the one that I'm gonna make. So if you're going for a specific size, then you'll wanna have a ruler as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So first we're going to cast on, and because I'm gonna do a long tail cast on, that means that I like to do probably at least 4 times as much as the length of the project. So if I'm gonna do a 9-inch dishcloth, then I know that I'm gonna probably need roughly 4 times as much for my long tail cast on. So be generous. I'd rather you be generous than not. So I'm actually doing a little bit more than even 4 times. Now I'm gonna be doing a long tail cast on. I like the look of that on the edge. You can, of course, there's so many different ways you can cast on. Regardless of the way you choose to cast on, just allocate enough yarn for you to do that, because we are going to, at least I am, for a 9-inch dishcloth, I'm gonna start with 48 stitches on the needle. So I'm gonna cast on 48 stitches. So again, depending on if you're doing a larger one or a smaller one, you can adjust the amount of yarn that you're starting with to cast on. Now, to do a long tail cast on, here's how I do it. So I make this kind of this triangle with my fingers like this, and then I grab onto the rest of this triangle with my 3 fingers. Now, from there, now I'm gonna come from behind, almost like another finger. I'm coming from behind the triangle, and then I'm simply just gonna twist, and now I'm facing the other way. So let's do that again. I'm gonna come from behind the triangle. I'm gonna then twist, so I'm facing the other direction. And now from here, this is technically gonna be my first stitch. From here, I'm gonna go under my thumb, over my pointer finger, and then through my thumb and pull. So now I've got 2 stitches. So again, I'm gonna hold this so it doesn't slide off. I'm gonna go under my thumb, over my pointer finger, through my thumb, and pull. Under my thumb, over my pointer finger, through my thumb, and pull. So now we have 4 stitches there. Under, over, through, and pull. Under, over, through, and pull. Under, over, through, and pull. So we got 6, 7 stitches, 8, 9, 10, and like I said, I'm gonna put on 48. So go ahead and cast on yours. So okay, so here we go. So here are my 48 casted on stitches. It gives this nice braided look. So I like that as my edge. And now simply we're gonna start with just the regular knit stitch for the first 4 rows. So simply doing knit stitch all along the side, all throughout the whole side, and then we're gonna do 4 rows of that. So just a quick refresher on the knit stitch. If you need a longer tutorial on how to do the knit stitch, I'll link that in this video as well. Okay, so remember, we're gonna go behind our needle. So we're going in the back window. We're gonna grab our yarn, wrap our fingers around it so we've got control of the tension. And now we're in the back window, we're gonna go around the bend into the front window, pop it off the top. Into the back window, around the bend, through the front window, pop it off the top. And what I've noticed, some of you have said that, you know, some of your knitting can get tight and then it's hard to do it. And so what I've found is that if the more you slide your stitches to the tip of the needle as the needle gets thinner at the top, it's going to create a little bit more room in that stitch so that you can get in there. But then I like to slide it down so that I'm creating the space. You know, if I do the stitch both here at the tip, then it's going to be smaller. The stitch is going to be tighter. So once you get in behind that stitch, slide it onto the needle so that you're creating your stitch around the full size of the needle versus at the tip where it's smaller. So I'm slid it down here. So now I went from behind, I went around the bend. And then if you need more room, again, now I'm sliding to the tip of my needles to go to the front. But again, I'm sliding all the way through so that I'm making enough room in that stitch. And then I'm gonna pop it off the top so that it's a nice snug, but still loose enough that it's not too tight of a stitch, okay? So again, get in the back window, around the bend, front window, pop it off the top. And I also like to hold on to my stitches so that they're, you know, they're not slipping off of my needle. So I'm gonna go in the back, in the front, pop it off. So again, I'm gonna do this for 4 rows. So I will meet you back here. Well, let's just do this row together and then I'll do the others and meet you back here. So again, I'm just doing a regular knit stitch all the way across. And you're just sliding your stitches up as you need them. I like to keep my needles close to each other versus like knitting like far apart, just because then I feel like it just creates more holes in the project. But I like to, you know, work closer so that I'm not creating those extra gaps in the project. And so however you're doing it, stay consistent so that your project is consistent, has a consistent look and feel to it. Because if you are more of a loose knitter, that's fine if that's what you like. It's just then be consistent. Don't go tight, then loose, then tight, then loose, because then your project's gonna just look off balance. So I'm gonna slide these down, make more room. Slide these up. This is really good, obviously for practice because you're doing a lot of knit stitching. And then of course we'll be doing the seed stitching in the center. So you get to practice a lot of knits and lots of purls, and it's repetitive. So it's, you know, if you are comfortable with your knits and your purls, it makes for good TV knitting or just, you know, relaxing knitting where it's not too complicated, but you just kind of get to zone out at least a little bit and enjoy just the feel of knitting in your hands. Slide that down. Slide these up. All right, so we're just going to do that 3 more times. Flip our needle over and do that 3 more times. All right, I'll meet you back here after I've done my 3 more rows. Okay, so now I've completed my first 4 rows of the knit stitch also known as the garter stitch. And what I'm going to do next is I want to change colors. So I'm going to change now to this coral color. And how you change colors is you're going to put your needle just like you're going to start a new knit stitch. And so you're just going to put it behind. And now instead of wrapping around your blue working yarn or whatever color you got, instead of using that working yarn, you're just going to simply, if I can get untangled here, you're going to make a loop with your new color, and you're going to place that around that that stitch as if that's the color that you basically you wrapped it around with that new color. And so we're just putting that loop right over the needle, and then we're going to go through that front window and pop it off. And now here you want to make sure you're still holding on to both colors and pulling it tight. I like to get a couple stitches underway before I loosen my grip. So, sorry, I'm getting a little tangled up here. So I'm going to, again, now I've dropped, even though I want to keep it a little tight, but now I've dropped the blue and I'm going to wrap it around with my new color. Pop that through the front window and then pop it off the top. Get a few more stitches ready to go here. Back window, new color, front, pop it off. Back window, wrap it with the new color, front window, pop it off. Now that I've started, again, here, I just like to pull that tight. Now you can tie this in a knot. However, it looks a little better at the end if you weave these into the dishcloth. So I'm gonna actually leave these but I am ready to now cut the blue. So I do like to get it started before I do cut, but I guess you can always cut before you start too. So I'm going to cut the blue. So now we're done with that for now. And now we're going to be working with just the coral. And so we're just going to take that all the way across. Actually, no, okay. Oh, before I get too far, I'm gonna undo this first stitch here, that last one. So in order to create that border that goes around the dishcloth, I start the first 4 with just the regular knit stitch before I'm now going to start the seed stitch. And so the seed stitch is really just alternating between knit stitch and purl stitch. And so we're just going to be alternating. So we can start with a knit stitch, and then now we're going to go to our purl stitch. And so we're just going to take that working yarn to the front, in the front window, around the bend. Oops, almost dropped it here. Let's hang on tight. To the back window, and then pop it off the top. Bring our working yarn to the back. Do our knit stitch, bring our yarn to the front. If you need a refresher on how to do the purl stitch, I'll also link that in this video, but let me just do it slow a couple more times. So this is, again, knit stitch, and then bring the yarn to the front. From the top, we're going into that stitch around the needle, to the back window, pop it off the top, bring that working yarn to the back. We're doing regular stitch, slide some of these up. And now, okay, so I just kind of took that break to slide my stitches up and I'm like, uh-oh, what am I doing next? And so sometimes I have short-term memory loss and I have to remember, uh-oh, what am I doing next? So if you need to know, am I doing a purl stitch next or a knit stitch next? You can simply look at the work you've just done. And so these bars are purls and these V's are knits. So I can see I've done purl, 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 and now what's next is a purl because it's every other. And then again, the knit stitch, knit stitch. I just did a knit stitch. I can see that little V in there. So now I know my next is a purl stitch. So no worries if you lose your spot, you just look at the work you've just done to know what comes next. And then once you get in your groove, your hands just kind of know, okay, knit stitch, purl stitch, knit stitch, purl stitch. And you'll just kind of have a rhythm and a flow going where you don't have to think about it too much. But definitely if you step away and if you spread your stitches out, you can see it even more. You can see the purls with the bars in the front, and then the knit stitches are those little V's that are tucked. Sometimes they're tucked in there, but if you pull it down, you can see the V's that are in there. So I just did a purl stitch, so I know my next stitch is going to be the regular knit stitch. Okay, I'm going to pop that off the top, yarn to the front, purl, knit, split, knit, purl, knit, and so on. And then, so that means my last 4 stitches, oh, see, I can tell that this one's backwards. Here we go. So my last 4 are going to be only knit stitches, no purls. And when I do that throughout the whole project, then it'll create that nice border along the side. So here we go. We've got our new color going. So I'm going to flip it over so you can see what it looks like with the new color. And so you can start to see you can see it with the 2 different colors. The knits and the purls really stand out there. So on this edge, I'm just gonna, again, tug on the blue and the pink or the coral so that those don't get too loose. Okay, so that was our first row. So let's go ahead and do, I'm just basically gonna do 4, 4, 4, 4, 4 throughout this this dishcloth. So again, if you wanted to make a thicker color or a solid color, you know, have at it. Do what your project calls for. And I'm gonna do the pattern with these 3 colors. So I'm gonna go ahead and do 4 more with the 4 knits. Then I'm gonna alternate knit stitch, purl stitch, knit stitch, purl stitch, and then the 4 knits at the end. Okay, so I've completed my 4 rows of this coral, this beautiful coral color that I absolutely love. And so as you can see, we have the beginning border in the garter stitch, and then I've started the seed stitch in this new color, and I'm keeping that border on the edge. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to change colors again. And so now we're going to change to yellow. So again, I'm just going to act as if I'm going to knit this stitch. So I'm putting my needle behind, and instead of wrapping around the coral pink, I am going to wrap around the yellow. So I'm just going to make a little loop as if I'm, wrapping around with the yellow. Oops, just popped off there for a second. And now I'm going to knit with the yellow. So I'm going in front, and I'm going to pop that off the end. Now again, this is going to be a little loose because that we haven't cut or secured the coral yet. So we're going to drop the tail and just use, so we're dropping the yellow tail along with that coral, and now all we have is the yellow working yarn. So I'm going to do a couple stitches before I cut. So I'm going to do, let's do our 4. Okay, and so now, again, if you wish, you could, you know what I can do? I can just tie this in a knot just to secure it so that it doesn't keep getting so loose. But at the end, I'm going to untie that, and then I will weave the ends into the washcloth. So now I am ready to cut the coral color. So I leave just enough so that I can still weave that in. And now I can continue on with my yellow. Now you're gonna find that if you're changing colors, you're gonna have all these tails on the end, and that's okay because we're gonna weave those in at the end. So just know that we'll take care of those when we're all finished. And so now I've done my 4 for the border, and now I can see the last stitch I did was a knit stitch and then a purl, knit, purl. So now I'm going to start with a purl. So I'm going to bring my yarn to the front, around, back, and off. And now I'm just going to continue going all the way across in my new color. And same thing, I'm going to do 4 rows of the yellow before I then switch back to the blue, and then I'm just going to repeat this pattern of blue, you know, this teal, coral, and then yellow, teal, coral, and yellow, and then that'll be the pattern that I'll have on my washcloth. So I'm going to go ahead and do this for the next 4 rows, and then I will meet you back here. But just a quick pit stop here so you can see. So now my yellow is the color being knitted, and again, you can see the knit stitch, you can see the alternating purls there. And it's creating a new color block. All right, so I'm going to carry on doing 4 rows of this, and I'll meet you back here. All right, I'm back. How is your project looking? I'm pretty happy with mine. I decided to change it up as I was going. I was originally planning just to do stripes, same size stripes, but as I kept going, as I got into the yellow, I thought, oh, I kind of want a dominant color. So I changed it up. And you know, that's the fun thing about knitting is like, you get to change it up as you go if you want. So, you know, I encourage you to, you know, make your projects your own, and don't be afraid to go outside the lines and create something different than what you had originally planned, because you never know, it might turn out even better. Okay, so I'm really happy with how it turned out so far. What we need to do next is, once you get your project to the size that you want it, you're gonna have to cast off to complete your project. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just gonna do, you know, just a regular cast off. If you need a refresher on how to cast off, I'll link that video here as well. But remember, we're just gonna do 2 regular knit stitches, and then we're just gonna like leapfrog our first stitch over our second stitch. So we're gonna go underneath and leapfrog and not lose that first stitch. And then we'll just keep doing that again and again all the way to the end. So we have our 2 stitches, and I'm gonna leapfrog one over the other. And do that all the way down. I have found that, especially with the washcloths, that not leaving the cast off too loose, because what I'm gonna do after this is I'm gonna wet this down and then stretch it out on a blocking board to keep it, to kind of shape it. So if the cast off is too loose, it kind of, then it gets overstretched on the blocking board. So you want it kind of tight, kind of snug, not too snug, but you know, not too loose either. And so we're just gonna cast off all the way down. So now we're here at our last stitch, and you can just pull it so that then you can, let's get those out of the way. You can then trim it and tie that in a knot. And then what you're gonna have is your project, and then every time you changed a color, you are gonna have these tails on the end of your project. So what we wanna now go back and do is weave in these ends. So I just tied a loose knot into these colors so that they wouldn't get loose when I started the next row. But I'm gonna untie that knot so that I can weave them through without creating this extra knot. I don't want these extra knots on the side. So if you don't mind that there's knots, you can just keep the knot in there. Okay, I thought I did this pretty loose. It's trying to give me problems. So we're just gonna give it a little wiggle. There we go. I was pulling on the wrong one. All right. So that was just a knot that I put in to prevent the stem from getting too loose as I was switching colors. So now I'm going to weave them in. And here's where, you know, you don't really need to weave them in all that much, but I would say, you know, at least a couple up and downs probably will do you well, do you good. You don't want to pull too tight because you still want it to keep its shape. And so I'm just gonna go up and down a few times. Give it a little space. And then maybe oh, it fell off. So that tells me I'm done. And then you just give it a real close trim. There you go. Don't even know it's there. And now you just gotta go and do that for the rest of your tails. All right, so I'm all done. I weaved in all of the tails. I think it turned out really nice. I'm really liking that I decided to use a dominant color. However, I am also gonna do a striped one as well because I think that would be also super cute. So my very last step is that I'm going to go rinse this off, get it really nice and wet, and then I'm gonna block it. So I'll show you that in just a minute. Okay, so I just went ahead and got this super soaking wet, and then I wrung it out so that I got most of the water out, but it's still pretty wet. I wanted it to still be pretty wet so that I could shape it into, you know, a nice square, and that I could, you know, stretch it out a little bit as well. So once you have your the shape where you want it to be, then you can just go ahead and block it. And then it should dry pretty quickly. It'll probably take, give it a good day. If you put it out in the sun, it'll dry even faster. All right, so now I'm just gonna let that dry, probably overnight. Like I said, you could probably stick it outside if it's nice out, and it would dry even faster. But there you go. I think it turned out great. I'll include an after picture too once it's all dry. So here is the finished product after I've blocked it and let it dry. I just absolutely love how it turned out. And now we have this super cute washcloth. And so we can start to add to the collection. What I'm going to be working on next is this kind of washcloth where it's a little different design, where it's a diagonal design and it's got this nice border along the edge. So watch for my next video because this is the one I'm working on.